Good morning, viewers, and welcome to a brand new week, another edition of the Economy and Politics show. It's Monday, October 5th, 2020, and we're here to give you discussions around policy, investments, the economy, and how it affects the populace. A major focus is the budget 2021, as we know that the Federal Executive Council last week sent its estimate and the plan to present that budget, all things being equal, this week. So let's give you a lineup of what we're discussing today for our show. First, we'll look at budget 2021 proposals and estimates. We'll also look at the overview of the 2020 budget. The latest article that has been published by Proshare will be discussed briefly. It's titled NESG V CBN, Beyond the Battleground-The Need for Facts, Perspective and Resolution. We also have the illicit financial flows and the costs to Nigeria and Africa. And we'll wrap up with the quest for restructuring in Nigeria, which is increasing by the day. Let's begin with the economic indicators we have at the moment in Nigeria. Our gross domestic product remains minus 6.1% as at second quarter 2020. Our inflation rate as at August 2020 is 13.2%. Interest rate, that's the monetary policy rate for the country, is 11.5%. Unemployment is 27.1%. Our misery index is 55.01%, while our capital importation in terms of investments as at second quarter 2020 was $1.29 billion. First, budget 2021, like we said earlier, that is the main call for today. The Federal Executive Council last week, Wednesday, approved the budget estimate of 13.08 trillion naira for the 2021 fiscal year. According to the Minister of Finance, Budget and National Planning, Mrs. Zainab Ahmed, in a statement to the State House correspondents at the end of the council meeting last week, which was presided by President Muhammadu Buhari, she disclosed that the budget proposal was designed to enable the country attain inclusive growth. Now, here are some of the key objectives of the budget 2021, which is being proposed and estimated at 13.08 trillion. First is to stimulate the economy, as we all are aware of the challenges facing global economies like Nigeria, reeling through the COVID-19 disruption, creating jobs, considering the high rate of unemployment in the country, enhancing growth, creating infrastructural investments, which is very important to unlock the economy, and promote manufacturing and local production, which is the basis for our economy to be productive and competitive globally. The budget 2021, like I said earlier, all things being equal, is expected to be presented this week to effect the January to December budget cycle in the country. As we all remember that this administration is trying to maintain that cycle of January to December in terms of budget implementation. It has been a challenge. Since 1999, we had it once or twice where the January to December budget cycle was effected. Now let's look at the key assumptions of budget 2021. Like we said earlier, the estimate is 13.08 trillion naira. The oil benchmark, that's the crude oil price benchmark for this budget for 2021, is $40 per barrel, $40 per barrel. The exchange rate is 379 naira to a dollar, while the gross domestic product target is 3%. Inflation rate target is 11.95%, while the oil production target is 1.86 million barrels per day. Let's take you back to 2020 budget. The assumptions as at that time, when it was being proposed to the National Assembly, initial estimate was 10.33 trillion naira, but the National Assembly capped it up to 10.8 trillion naira, and it was passed and sent to the President, who signed it after review. But note that after the COVID-19 disruption had hit hard across the globe, affecting global economies and Nigeria, there was a revision to the 2020 budget, which was revised down to 10.523 trillion naira. The benchmark initially proposed and passed and signed for 2020 budget was $57 per barrel. The exchange rate was 305 naira to a dollar. The GDP target was 2.93%, while the inflation rate target was 10.81%. Oil production target as at that time was 2.18 million barrels per day. Note that with the revised budget estimate, The production target was revised to 1.94 million barrels per day, while the crude oil price benchmark was revised to $25 per barrel. So the current revised crude oil price benchmark still ties into the current crude oil price that hovers between $38 to $40 per barrel. Expectedly, this budget has received a lot of views and analysis, and we'll bring some of them in the course of the month as we look and monitor when the president will present the budget to National Assembly. We are looking at most likely this week, and that's why we'll be monitoring the developments as they occur. Over the weekend, Proshare Nigeria's leading financial information hub published an article, which of course is a follow-up to the debate and engagement between two institutions that have great influence on our economy. The Nigeria Economic Summit Group, on its part, a leading policy think tank group that brings together private and public sector players to discuss the economy and look at ways to provide solutions. This has been its role since 1996, and the Central Bank of Nigeria, the key player in our economy, the monetary policy driver, and maintaining stability, currency, and every level of support to the economy. So let's get down to this article. The title of the article, published by Proshare, like I said earlier, is the NESG versus CBN, and the need for facts, perspectives, and resolution. Note that prior to now, the NESG had issued out a 15-point article. So let's take a look at the whole developments around that article. NESG set out a 15-point argument for the government to take action on what the body considered a dangerous drift in the economy. The NESG's summation was generally well received outside government circles as it addressed points that academics and entrepreneurs had previously felt nervous about. In a speedy and abrasive response to the NESG, the Nigeria Economic Summit Group, the banking sector regulator, the Central Bank of Nigeria, railed by the NESG's goal to go public with a communique titled "Matters of Urgent Attention Let Loose a Spitfire of Information on its Intervention Measures." The money market regulator insisted that the NESG would have behaved more appropriately if a memo was sent privately to the bank. In a paragraph of a press release signed by the regulator's Director of Communications, the bank noted that the CBN also feels compelled to let Nigerians know that despite the cordial and open relations between both organizations, they could have raised its allegations directly with us, but that never happened. Instead, they choose to release a press statement having leaked its content to a leading business newspaper in the country. From the Proshare article, it's clearly stated that if the NSG had, according to the CBN's response to the think tank's communique, issued a press statement, it is difficult to understand how such a release could have been leaked, since the intention of the press release is to make the information public. A press statement to all intent is drafted to be made public and is unlikely to have been passed quietly to media house under the cover of the night. But this is a minor point which is being raised. Of greater importance and trust of this article is that as a think tank, that's the NESG, likening them to the Brookings institutions in the US and Japan's Nomura Research Institute, the NESG is not required to have backdoor discussions with governments of the agencies before making press statements or communique. Economic observers note that while a fraternal relationship with public institutions is desirable, it is neither inevitable nor compulsory. The job of the NESG is to provide a compelling interpretation of unfolding economic reality as accurately and dispassionately as possible in the interest of both private and public sector stakeholders. It is not a black suit fraternity sworn to an oath of public secrecy. In this respect, the CBN may have misinterpreted the NESG's purpose and methods in deciding what it sees as acceptable conduct. However, the NESG could have admittedly handled the communication gap between itself and the CBN better. The economic body could have given the CBN a heads up as an act of courtesy and left it at that. Both institutions appear to have had some festering grievances that plays up in the adversarial language and actions surrounding events after the NESG communique was released. The battle between CBN and the NESG is brilliant for neutrals who wish to see clarity in economic policy formulation and management, but it would have been much better if the egos of both institutions and their managers were less fragile and provided better economic insight. Now let's take from what the Proshare article says a token, a word from the local economic analyst who noted that relationships never die a natural death. They are always murdered by attitude, behavior, ego, or ignorance. The NESG and the CBN may need to decide which of the vices apply based on what has been highlighted here. But more importantly, both bodies need to take to the words of Ayn Rand in her novel Atlas Shrugs. She observed that there are two sides to every issue. One side is right and the other is wrong, but the middle is always evil. The man who is wrong still remains or retains some respect for truth, if only by accepting the responsibility of choice. But the man in the middle is a knave who blanks out the truth in order to pretend that no choice of values exists, who is willing to sit out the course of any battle, willing to cash in on the blood of the innocent or to crawl on his belly to the guilty, who dispenses justice by condemning both the robber and the robbed to jail, who solves conflicts by ordering the tinker and the fool to meet each other halfway. If any compromise between food and poison, it is only death that can win. In any compromise between good and evil, it is only evil that can profit. In that transfusion of blood which drains the good to feed the evil, the compromise is the transmitting rubber tube. Those are very interesting insights, and you can read that article, very comprehensive one. Log on to our website, www.proshare.com, and log on to our homepage, and you will see NESG versus CBN, the discussions beyond the battleground, the need for facts, perspective, and resolution. It's an article you really want to read. This is for analysts, investors, students in the financial market, in the economic space, the general public. You all need to just learn a lot how institutions engage as it has to do with the economy. Let's get to something that has really plagued Nigeria and Africa. We desire development, we desire growth, but something plagues us, and it's called illicit financial flows. Every year, an estimated $88.6 billion, equivalent to 3.7% of Africa's GDP, leaves the continent as illicit capital flight, according to UNCTAD, United Nations Center for Trade and Development. It recently released a report on economic development in Africa for 2020, and this is what it captured. Illicit financial flows, IFFs, are movement of money and assets across borders which are illegal in source, transfer, or use, according to the report entitled Tackling Illicit Financial Flows for Sustainable Development in Africa. It shows that these outflows are nearly as much as the combined total annual inflows of official development assistance, valued at $48 billion. And yearly foreign indirect investments pegged at $54 billion received by African countries, the average for 2013 to 2015. Illicit financial flows rob Africa and its people of their prospects, undermining transparency and accountability and eroding trust in African institutions. UNCTAD Secretary General Mukisha Kituyi, a Japanese, stated this. These outflows include illicit capital flight, tax and commercial practices like misinvoicing of trade shipments, and criminal activities such as illegal markets, corruption, or theft. IFFs related to the export of extractive commodities, $40 billion in 2015, were the largest component of illicit capital flight from Africa. Although estimates of the IFFs are large, they likely understate the problem and its impact. IFF and the costs to Nigeria and Africa should improve regional cooperation on IFFs and tax as a way forward. Although IFFs are a major constraint to domestic resource mobilization in Africa, African governments are not yet sufficiently engaging in the reform of the international taxation system. Transparency and cooperation between tax administrations globally and within the continent is key to the fight against tax evasion and tax avoidance. Regarding regional cooperation on taxation within the continent, the African Tax Administration Forum, ATAF, can provide a platform for regional cooperation among African countries. Regional knowledge networks to enhance national capacities to tackle process of money laundering and recover stolen assets, including within the context of the African Continental Free Trade Agreement, are crucial in the fight against corruption and crime-related IFFs, the report says. Tax revenue lost to IFFs are especially costly for Africa, where public investments and spending on the Sustainable Development Goals are most lacking. In 2014, Africa lost an estimated $9.6 billion to tax havens, equivalent to 2.5% of total tax revenue of the continent. Tax evasion is at the core of the world's shadow financial system. Commercial IFFs are often linked to tax avoidance or evasion strategies designed to shift profits to lower tax jurisdictions. Due to the lack of domestic transfer pricing rules in most African countries, local judicial authorities lack the tools to challenge tax evasion by multinational enterprises. But IFFs are not just a national concern in Africa. President Muhammadu Buhari of Nigeria once said, illicit financial flows are multidimensional and transnational in character. Like the concept of migration, they have countries of origin and destination, and there are several transit locations. The whole process of mitigating illicit financial flows therefore cuts across several jurisdictions. Solutions to this problem must involve international tax cooperation and anti-corruption measures. The international community should devote more resources to tackle IFFs, including capacity building for tax and customs authorities in developing countries. African countries need to strengthen engagement in international taxation reform, make tax competition consistent with protocols of the Africa Continental Free Trade Agreement, and aim for taxing rights. Let's just hold on there and emphasize the need for Europe, particularly UK and European Union nations. They need to support this cause because over time we've seen the reports of being the origin or destination of these IFFs. United States of America, Switzerland, and other islands. There are various islands in the Caribbean that are known for tax havens, where what is due to the country, we see an evasion that is costing a lot. So imagine that $88 billion has been lost to IFFs and the cost it has to Africa, the cost it has to infrastructure, the cost it has to even empowering the citizens and addressing fundamental socioeconomic issues, including the Sustainable Development Goals target of 2030. Indeed, if Africa is going to really make an impact, including Nigeria, there must be a clear resolution and pathway to addressing IFFs. And like the suggestion is put there, the tax system has to be reviewed concerning African tax administrative system. It has to be robust, there has to be cohesion and effective cooperation. That brings us to a very, very important topic that has been dominating the space in the country, socio-political and political economic space. It's something I've been raising over time on this show, and again, we're seeing several more leaders, even religious leaders, raising the need for the word restructuring. From the General Overseer of the Redeemed Christian Church of God, Pastor Enoch Adeboye, to the likes of Madam Gali Naba, former Speaker of the House of Representatives, to Professor Pat Utomi, to Dr. Boniface Chizie, Professor Akpan Hoganekpo, an economist, national leaders, even in a manner, the Vice President of the Federal Republic of Nigeria, Professor Yemi Osibanjo, we need to revisit our country and how it's structured to move it to the next level. Some people would take it like a Southwest connotation. It's not a Southwest connotation. It is a national quest if we are going to move forward as a country. And so some people keep saying that this restructuring thing is vague, that there's no clarity. And so from my perspective, there are areas that we can look at when we're talking about restructuring. And first and clear, which I've always emphasized, is the revenue allocation formula. We need to restructure it. A situation where the federal government has 52% and states 27% and local governments 21% is not sustainable. The federal government is taking too much. It's time for the states to be more empowered and local governments so they can get resources to address the challenges of the people at the grassroots and the citizens. A clear example is the issue of human capital development. The federal government is taking so much, having a huge chunk of the revenue. And so we've come to that point where we have to revisit the revenue allocation. The Revenue Mobilization and Fiscal Commission, RMFAC, are doing their best, and we hope that this administration will embrace the new proposal they will bring. I have proposed that the federal government should take a cut, the lowest in the revised structure. Then the states and local governments will take the higher chunk. That's the best way to tackle it. And then we talk about fiscal federalism. Fiscal federalism is very important, where states are able to control more of their resources. We have too much on the exclusive lists. We need to have more of the concurrents and the concurrents. And when we're discussing around that, look at mineral resources. Solid minerals is one example. In the north, there are huge endowed resources, but states can't tap into it because of the exclusivity to the federal government. The same applies even in the crude oil production. Niger Delta, you may say 13% derivation is good, but no. They need more control to develop and transform their states. Because even over 50 years of oil production in the Niger Delta, if you visit places like Otumara, or Loibiri, Ogoni, and other parts, you would weep and wonder why oil-producing regions are not experiencing that development they require. So this may be a pathway. Fiscal federalism. Lagos State is still begging to get that special status it deserves, despite the fact that population has increased to over 20 million. This is why we need fiscal federalism. So to all stakeholders in the country, it's not a call to break up the country, it's a call to redefine our nation. No region should be scared of fiscal federalism. And then we'd like the administration of President Muhammadu Buhari to revisit, to some extent, the 2014 National Conference report. There's some references there that can help rejig this whole prospect of restructuring. And that should not be an issue for the All Progressive Congress government if it wants to run an inclusive administration that looks at reports that can move the nation forward. Even in the All Progressive Congress, there was a committee that looked at restructuring. What are the plans? How have they taken it up? Those are the issues. And then to cap it, the restructuring of our security architecture. The FSARS, the Special Anti-Robbery Squad, FSARS incidents has raised again the need for us to restructure a whole security architecture. The terror unleashed by insurgents in Northeast, the insecurity level across the whole country is not one thing that even the president will be able to handle. It calls for a whole restructuring of our security architecture. Strengthening of the community policing. States need to also determine and take more lead in their security. Because security is very important for investments. So how can we run a security architecture for over 50 years that's not been restructured? The police, particularly, we have the best, among the best across the world. But in terms of funding and the recent bill signed by the President on police force, we need to look at how states can be more involved in defining their security architecture. Several states have their security apparatus, but need to work more with the current security infrastructure we have in the country. In restructuring and security architecture, we need to also look at intelligence, equipment, training, and how we hope to improve and reposition our security in a way that it can handle external aggression and particularly the internal challenges we face. This has become very important. So in restructuring, it's not vague, it's particularly, from my perspective, revolves more around the fiscal, the revenue distribution, and security. If we can address those first three key areas, it becomes very important for us. We also need to define our economic system. I know that several parties, the All Progressive Congress is viewed more as pro-state, pro-people, but it's beginning to see the realities of driving market reforms because of the interventions of multilateral institutions. But an economic philosophy on how we want to grow as a country is very important too. This is how states can tie in to see how they contribute. So the quest for restructuring is very clear. We can't continue on this model. It also covers the issues of appointments. There are calls for meritocracy, very important, competence. So we implore the government and all stakeholders to douse the fears of disintegration. Restructuring can be done better when we take all our fears and concerns and address them head on. The National Assembly is a very strong force in this regard, and we hope that as they consider reviewing the Constitution, all those proposals and approaches to how we can run our elections properly, how we can improve governance, subnational level and local government, improve revenue, all those issues will be taken on board, and we would see a robust review of our Constitution. That for me will be a very great legacy for the 9th National Assembly if they take all these things on board, including a legal system that strengthens the independence of the judiciary, gives them the full autonomy they require. I even want to see more autonomy for State House of Assembly. We commend this administration for signing those bills into law, because State House of Assembly should be able to hold their state governors to account without any fear or favor. Just like we see the National Assembly call ministers and call them to account for how they manage their various ministries, resources, and projects. We need to see more of that happen at the subnational level, where a lot is expected in terms of performance and execution of programs and projects. If we drive this and achieve this, it will become a very important way of charting our nation's course to greatness. It's very imperative, it's important that we move our nation forward in this regard, and we hope that all the stakeholders will take this into consideration. As we wrap up, I would like to remind Nigerians of some of the key underlying issues that the President, Muhammadu Buhari, raised in his 60th anniversary address to Nigerians. And then you will understand why it's important that restructuring is integrated, because this all happens when we have a very robust restructuring plan. First, he talks about evolving and sustaining a democratic culture that leaves power in the hands of the people. The big question is, does this current constitution, 1999 constitution, does it reflect a democratic culture that leaves power in the hands of the people? That is why we need to revisit this constitution and make sure that it's pro-people. The second is supporting the enthronement of the rule of law, demanding accountability of elected representatives and contributing to good governance. To demand accountability, we need the cooperation of government officials, political office holders, and public office holders when they are required to give account. Just recently, the Socioeconomic Rights and Advancements Accountability Project, SERAP, commended the Deputy Governor of Kebbi State for declaring its full assets. And they've enjoined all government officials in this administration dispensation to follow suit. A basic thing like declaration of assets from the president to vice president to governors to every public and political office holder shouldn't be a challenge. Declare your assets, people can assess it, request from it from the Code of Conduct Bureau to see if these assets declaration are real, and then people can raise concerns if any political or public office holder is living above what he or she has declared. Increasing our commitment to peaceful coexistence in a peaceful, secure, and united Nigeria. That can only happen if we structure our security architecture and achieve fiscal federalism. Harnessing and optimizing our tremendous human and natural resources to attain our goal of being in the top 20 economies of the world, and in the process, lifting 100 million Nigerians out of poverty in 10 years, strengthening institutions to make them strong in protecting national interests, and imbibing tolerance in diversity. Clearly, the reason why we need to review our revenue distribution, achieve fiscal federalism, and most importantly, have a very clear economic philosophy. Because to lift 100 million people out of poverty, there must be a very clear, audacious, and bold economic philosophy, like we saw in Brazil under Professor Fernando Henrique Cardoso when he was president, and in India when you had Prime Minister Professor Manmohan Singh. You can't lift millions of people out of poverty if there's no clarity and sustainable economic philosophy. It will take bold ideas, cooperation, and a united Nigeria. These are achievable if we take heed to the need to restructure, review our nation to make it work for all Nigerians. And that will be all for today's edition of the Economy and Politics Show. You can visit our website, www.proshareng.com, to watch our videos with our news stories and reports. You can also send your comments and views about the budget 2021, the assumptions you've seen, and issues around restructuring the country. How best can we achieve it? Send it to news@proshareng.com. We are ready to receive it and respond appropriately. Note by 10 a.m. we have our first edition of Market Review for the new week. You don't want to miss it. We'll be giving you developments in the financial and capital market as relates to the economy. To come your way again, thank you for watching. Have a nice day and stay safe.